So we are less than a month away from the 2025 NBA trade deadline, and I want to give you guys 20 big names that could be on the move this year. Now, there's going to be some more realistic options than some others. There's going to be some far-fetched ideas that may not come at this year's trade deadline, but they could definitely come up in the off season when teams have a little bit more financial flexibility to make these massive moves. Also, a ton of you guys are not subscribed. 23% of you are, 77% of you guys aren't subscribed. So make sure you're subscribed to be alerted for all my videos talking about the NBA this year, in the off season, about the draft. Subscribe and let me know what you guys think your favorite team is going to do at this year's trade deadline. Who do you think is going to get traded? Who do you think is going to get moved that maybe nobody is talking about right now? I got 20 names for you guys. They're all big ones. Let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the most obvious one, someone that's currently suspended from his team right now, and that is Jimmy Butler of the Miami Heat. Yeah, this is just not the season the Miami Heat wanted with Jimmy Butler. He did have a player option at the end of the year for next year's season that he was most likely going to opt out of if the Miami Heat never traded him. The Miami Heat are a respectable team this year. Tyler Hero is playing like an all-star caliber talent. They haven't really gotten the most out of Bam Adebayo this year, but Jimmy Butler has had his good games and he's had his bad games. He didn't look as into it as he's been in the past, and we thought we were going to maybe get pissed off, locked in Jimmy Butler this year, and it's kind of been the opposite of that. And this story has dragged out so much. Shams and Jimmy's agent were going back and forth on Twitter for a little bit. Jimmy Butler now publicly has requested a trade. He wants to go to teams that really can't even trade for him, and his most desirable destination is the Phoenix Suns, and we're going to get into the Suns and maybe more than one Phoenix Sun later in this video. But Jimmy this year is averaging 17.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 5 assists on the year. He's shooting 55% from the field, 37% from three across 22 games. It seems like his Miami Heat career is over. He brought them to the NBA Finals in 2020 and in 2023. He's one of the best players in Miami Heat history, and it seems like they're going to get maybe pennies on the dollar for Jimmy Butler just because he lost a ton of leverage for the Heat now that he wants a trade and he could be a free agent at the end of the year. So there's a massive risk in trading for Jimmy Butler just because he's 35 years old. He's basically quit on his team this season, and he could be a free agent at the end of the year. I'm really intrigued to see where Jimmy Butler gets traded to. Is it going to be one of the teams we know about, or is it going to be a mystery team? Next up, I want to talk about Julius Randle of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, I made a video recently on the channel talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves financial situation, what they could do to improve this team around Anthony Edwards, and I think all roads lead back to trading Julius Randle if they are serious about going all in this year, because they can't trade Rudy Gobert. Naz Reid is a free agent at the end of the year, so that may hurt his value a little bit. But like Naz Reid, Julius Randle has a player option at the end of the year, and he can become a free agent as well. He's making more money though this year, so it's easier to put him in a larger deal. He's making $33 million this year. He has a $30 million player option for next year. His numbers have dropped from 24 points per game with the Knicks last year to 19.5 points per game this year. The efficiency has actually gone up, but you're seeing at times he just doesn't seem as interested on the defensive side of the floor. He misses assignments, and there's multiple times a game where he's just taking plays off on the defensive end of the floor, especially if things are not going well for him offensively. He doesn't switch well. I do wonder if Minnesota is going to think about trading Julius Randle at this year's deadline. Now, Randle, who does have a player option at the end of the year, is still a good player, and I think a team could take a chance on Randle either as a number 2 or number 3, or just to shed off some larger salary in the long term to get Julius Randle's potential expiring contract at the end of the year. So I think Minnesota, if they're going to make a big move at this deadline, it's going to be involving Julius Randle, in my opinion. Another player I want to talk about that's making massive money that could be a free agent at the end of the year because he does have a team option is Fred VanVleet of the Houston Rockets. Fred VanVleet has a $44 million team option for next year's season. He's making $42.8 million this year, and he's having one of the worst seasons shooting the ball of his career, basically since that 2021 season. He's averaging 15 points, shooting 38% from the field on 14 shots a night, taking shots away from some of the younger guys as well. He's shooting 32% from three on almost 8 3-point attempts a night, and sometimes he's just shooting them out of games. But the Rockets have been such a good team this year, despite Fred VanVleet not performing to his usual expectations. They're one of the best teams in the Western Conference because of their defense, because of the Terror twins like Amen Thompson and Tari Eason. Alperen Şengün and Jalen Green have been playing great in the calendar year 2025. So I wonder if Houston's going to make a big move. I think all roads could lead back to Jimmy Butler. He's from the city of Houston. They can easily get to Jimmy Butler's $48 million with Fred VanVleet. They have a plethora of draft picks. They do have a couple young players they could throw in this trade as well. And the Rockets desperately need somebody that can take over a game in the fourth quarter, because if they're serious about this season, if they think that they could beat Denver, Memphis, OKC, or Dallas in a playoff series, and I think that is possible if they go out and get somebody like Jimmy Butler, where Şengün and Jalen Green become more secondary options, which probably suits them best right now in their careers. I think they could eventually be number ones, but maybe not this year in the playoffs, in a 7-game playoff series. You get somebody that has led teams to the finals before in Miami, and I think you can easily get Jimmy Butler with Fred VanVleet. I think it's tough for some other teams to get this deal done just because Jimmy's making $48 million, and you may have to trade multiple rotational pieces for somebody that I mentioned before is a free agent at the end of the year and is 35 years old. But I think Houston can easily get to that money, and they can also throw in a little bit of draft capital, which they have so much of, so they're not really going to feel it if this Jimmy experiment does not work out. I wanted to talk about a Portland Trailblazer that I think could also be moved this year, which could be a little bit of a surprise, and that is going to be Anfernee Simons. I think eyes could be on DeAndre Ayton, Jeremy Grant, Robert Williams, now more so Ayton and Grant. It's tough to move those guys. They may get a boatload of money right now and have a lot of years left on their deal, but I think Anfernee Simons could be an intriguing trade piece out there if the Trailblazers made him available, because I wonder if Portland could take a page out of Washington's book, a team they made a deal with in the offseason, and trade Simons right now, who has some solid value. He's making $25.8 million this year and $27.6 million next year, and is a free agent at the end of the 2026 season, and he's been a good three-point shooter for most of his career. He's shooting 38% from three during his 7-year career, shooting 36% from three this year on 8 attempts per game. He's somebody that can keep you in games with his microwave scoring, and that could be encouraging to a team that is trying to win right now, that could add some shooting, like teams like Orlando, the Clippers, Houston. These are good teams right now, but they do lack the shooting overall as a squad, so they could look to add Anfernee Simons. He could be a surprise name if he became available, and I wanted to have a Jazz or Blazer in this video, and I ended up going with Anfernee Simons out of those two teams. I think Lowry Markkanen would have been such an exciting trade piece if they didn't extend him, but since they did, they can't trade him this year at the deadline. That would come in the offseason, so I'm definitely going to talk about that at the end of the year, because I think Markkanen could get moved, but I think eyes could be on Anfernee Simons if the Blazers made him available. They're in this rebuild right now. They're really bad. They have a ton of guards, so I think they should capitalize on his value because he's been shooting the ball well this year. Speaking of shooting the ball well this year, gotta talk about Nikola Vucevic over there in Chicago. I mentioned it a ton of times that they want to probably move him, and he hasn't been moved yet, so that's making me think, does any team want to trade for Nikola Vucevic, who's averaging 20 points this year, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, and he's shooting 56% from the field and 43% from three, as well as 82% from the free throw line. And it's not like Vucevic got off to this crazy start and his numbers are a little bit inflated. No, over his last 17 games, he's averaging 20 and 10 on 54 and 41 splits. He's been an elite three-point shooter this year. He's making $20 million, and in today's NBA, that's not that much money to get to, and then he's making $21 million next year. Nikola Vucevic is 34 years old, but he just turned 34 years old the other month, so he's going to be 34 throughout the rest of this season, 35 next year. You know you're not getting a good defender, but if he could space the floor like this, I think that should be an encouraging trade asset out there, and I think Chicago is going to eventually move him just because that contract's a little bit easier to move than the next guy we're going to talk about, and that guy is Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic's teammate over there in Chicago. This has been a perfect year for the Bulls in just the aspect that Nikola Vucevic and Zach LaVine are playing well, so they increased their trade value, but is there any market for these guys right now? I feel like they would have been moved. Chicago does not want to win these games because they have a top 10 protected first-round pick that goes to San Antonio. Zach LaVine is 29 years old. He's averaging 23.5 points this year, shooting 51% from the field and 44% from three. And if you look at Zach LaVine's last 13 games, he's averaging 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, shooting 53% from the field and 47% from three on 7 attempts a night. That could be such an advantage to a team trying to win it all this year that is looking for a secondary shot creator. But the big thing is Zach LaVine is making $43 million right now, $46 million next year, and then is a $48 million player option in 2027 when he's going to be around 31, 32 years old. And that's the big risk in trading for Zach LaVine. But if teams already have that highly paid secondary shot creator, like a team with the Denver Nuggets, we'll talk about somebody on that team in a little bit. But yeah, they can match that salary with Zach LaVine's and upgrade that role with their hopes of winning a championship this year. And I think Zach LaVine could be a good number 2 in the playoffs because he's shown that he could be efficient throughout pretty much his whole Chicago Bulls tenure as a high volume scorer. It's just the defense isn't great. He's had the injury concerns in the past, but he seems healthy. He's playing really good right now. Chicago's got to trade him. So I just hit hinted at the Denver Nugget I'll talk about, and that is Michael Porter Jr. It can't be Aaron Gordon. It can't be Jamal Murray. They signed contract extensions too late in the offseason to get moved this year. They're not trading Nikola Jokic. So all roads lead to, if they're making a big trade, they're moving Michael Porter Jr. They're getting good play out of Christian Brown this year. Russell Westbrook, shout out to what he's doing in Denver. Julian Strawther's giving them some decent minutes off the bench. And Michael Porter Jr. has still been good this year. 19 points, 6.5 rebounds, shooting 52% from the field and 41% from three. But if Denver feels like they need to upgrade that role, because you can't trade Murray, you can't trade Gordon, he's 26 years old. Porter Jr. should have some trade value on the open market, even though he's not a good playmaker. He's not the best defender in the world, but he's an elite shooter. He's 6'10", and I would be really intrigued to see Michael Porter Jr. turn into a number 2 or number 1 option on a team where he could just go from 14 shots a night, which pretty much is around the range in his career, to taking 17, 18 shots a night, because I think Michael Porter Jr. could average 25 points per game on good efficiency on a different team. But Denver, for what they're trying to optimize right now with this version of Nikola Jokic, they could look to trade Michael Porter Jr. And I think if they're trying to go all in this year and want to make a big move, he's the only guy they can really trade. All right, so let's talk about our first Phoenix Sun, where I'm going to talk about multiple ones in this video. So we'll talk about Bradley Beal. And this guy, it's so funny, the talks and discourse around Bradley Beal as a trade piece, because Bradley Beal has a no trade clause. Him and LeBron James are the only players in the NBA that have a no trade clause. So you need Bradley Beal to sign off wherever you want to move him. And no, yeah, he has arguably the worst contract in the NBA. $50 million this year, $53 million next year, and has a player option in 2027 of $57 million. Yeah, I would like to bet that he's going to opt into that deal. So Bradley Beal is still a good player. He's shooting 49% from the field, 39% from three, 18 points per game. It's just pretty much since 2020, he's been hurt every year. He has yet to play over 60 games since that 2019 season, where he had back-to-back years playing every single game in the regular season. He's a good player. He's just overpaid right now, and Phoenix probably regrets trading for him during that 2023 offseason. It seems like Jimmy Butler wants to go to Phoenix. The only player that could realistically match that money is Bradley Beal, because they're not moving Kevin Durant or Devin Booker if they're getting somebody like Jimmy Butler, and you need Bradley Beal to sign off it. I think he'd probably want to go to South Beach. I don't think he would decline that part of the no trade clause. It's just, does Miami even want Bradley Beal? I think you're trading away Jimmy Butler to free up that cap space, and Bradley Beal doesn't help you whatsoever. He's got a type of contract that you may need to attach a first round pick or two, or a young player in that deal, and Phoenix is in the second apron right now. They can only move one future first round pick. So I think he's stuck. I don't think he gets traded, but I think there's something out there that if a team gets desperate, if he gets relocated to a third team, he's like, you know what, I just don't even want to be in Phoenix anymore. They don't want me. He ends up somewhere in like Brooklyn or Detroit that's willing to take him on, and if they get a first round pick out of it, they may end up doing something like that. Another guy that feels like he has to get traded this year because they can't afford him to be a free agent this summer and leave for nothing is 27-year-old Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans. BI this year has been banged up, unfortunately. Throughout his first 18 games, he averaged 22 points, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, shooting 46% from the field, 37% from three, and 85% from the line, and kind of looked like what he was in that 2023 season, where he was so good for New Orleans. He was getting triple doubles left and right to end that regular season. Last year, it felt like he took a step back, even though he was healthier for the Pelicans, and it just seems like Ingram has been dealing with injuries basically since his rookie season. He hasn't played over 64 games since that year, and has had multiple injuries pretty much every regular season since, but he's still a great scorer in the half court. He can get to the spots he wants. He's turned into a very good playmaker at 6'8", at the small forward position, and I think he would have a good trade market. You just got to get that wink that he would sign an extension in the offseason, similar to what the Knicks had with OG Anunoby or what the Pacers had with Pascal Siakam. So there's definitely some risk in trading for Brandon Ingram, but I think if you can get him for a little bit less than what his normal value would be, because he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, I would do so. I would love to see a team like Detroit go after Brandon Ingram, pair him up with Cade Cunningham over there, but I feel like New Orleans needs to trade him right now, because if they don't, that is a big fumble. They're not making the playoffs this year, and you need to get some assets in return for him. So I'll stay on the topic of New Orleans. I'm actually going to talk about 3 Pelicans in this video. We'll talk about the second one right now, and that is somebody that has been playing great as of late. CJ McCollum, the 33-year-old, is averaging now 23 points on the year, and over CJ McCollum's last 8 games, he's averaging 28.5 points, shooting 51% from the field, 48% from three, on 10 attempts tonight, and that's including a 50-point performance and a 12-point win against the Washington Wizards. And the Pelicans are so bad this year, they're not making the playoffs just because the Western Conference is so loaded and they have so much ground to make up on. And McCollum is making $33 million this year, and it drops to $30 million next year, and he's a free agent at the end of the 2026 season. And he's showing that he could still be a really good scorer in the half court. I don't think CJ McCollum can be your number 1, 2, or 3 on a playoff team, but if he can slide in maybe as that number 4 option, he probably wouldn't go for a lot, just where New Orleans is right now. And there's a chance that he's maybe implemented into a 3 or 4 team trade at the deadline to make some of the financials work, because he's making a lot of money and he's still a good player. I think a team that's making the playoffs this year would want CJ McCollum, because you only have to pay him for 1 more year after this one. So Brooklyn is doing a iconic tank job right now. They were too good out of the gate, and they said, Dennis Schroeder, you're going to Golden State. Dorian Finney-Smith, you're going to Los Angeles. And basically everybody is hurt right now. But Cam Johnson is probably the one Brooklyn net that is guaranteed to get traded this year, because the Nets would be very silly not to sell high on him, because he had a down year last year, fresh off that contract extension. Now that Mikal Bridges got traded to the Knicks, Cam Johnson, through 32 games, averaging 19.5 points, shooting 49% from the field, 43% from 3, 90% from the free throw line, basically has career highs across the board, and his efficiency has increased with the volume, which is great to see. He's dealing with an ankle injury right now, and if teams don't think that's a super serious one, he's going to easily get traded at this year's deadline, and it's probably going to be one of the more enticing trade assets, just because he's making $22.5 million this year, $20 million next year, and then back up to $22.5 million in 2027. So he's under contract for the next 2.5 years. So it's not like you have to now overpay for him because he's playing the best basketball he has of his career. You get him at a great market price, and Brooklyn wants to trade him. They want to tank. They want to lose more games. And I think a ton of teams should be calling Brooklyn to trade for Cam Johnson. And a team that Cam Johnson could end up going to, the Golden State Warriors. And the first one I want to talk about on that team, because we'll talk about multiple, Jonathan Kuminga, who's a restricted free agent at the end of the year. It's not the year that Warriors fans and maybe the ownership would have liked for Jonathan Kuminga based off what he did last year, but Kuminga has been playing better over the last few weeks, because Jonathan Kuminga's last 14 games, he's averaging 20.5 points, shooting 48% from the field, and a very encouraging 40% from 3, 6 rebounds, 2.5 assists. He's currently dealing with an ankle injury right now, so maybe they do ankle injury for ankle injury. Kuminga goes to Brooklyn, Cam Johnson goes to Golden State, but he's definitely recouped some of that trade value that maybe he lost at the beginning of the year. It's a wild card that he is a restricted free agent at the end of the year, which I don't think would deter teams for trading for Kuminga, because you can get it back on the restricted contract. You just got to match whatever team offers him a deal that he accepts, so you don't really have any risk of losing him. It's just the idea is, if Golden State wants to trade him for Cam Johnson right now, optimize the Curry era, or do they feel like he's 22 years old, we want to pay Jonathan Kuminga, and he's going to be the contingency plan once Curry eventually retires? Because the other Warrior that I'm going to mention in this video, Andrew Wiggins. And the reason why I'm talking about Andrew Wiggins instead of Draymond Green is because Draymond Green is not getting traded from Golden State, but Wiggins is making $26 million this year, $28 million next year, and $30 million in 2027. This is actually looked at as one of the worst contracts in the NBA going into this season, but Wiggins now is locked in. He doesn't have the injuries or the distractions he had last year, and he's playing some of the best basketball he has since that 2022 championship run with Golden State. He's averaging 16 points, 4 rebounds, and is shooting 39% from 3. He still fits this offense very well for Golden State. Can he be a number 2 in the playoffs? No. And that's what he kind of is for Golden State right now. He would be the contract they would have to leverage in maybe a Cam Johnson trade or a bigger deal involving Jimmy Butler. But you'd have to trade Wiggins and either like Kevon Looney, Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson. You're trading a lot of your depth for Jimmy, who's 35, and I don't even think makes the Warriors a finals team this year. So I think if they make a trade like that, Wiggins has to be involved, because they're not trading Steph or Draymond. And a player that's been in trade rumors as of late because he's a free agent at the end of the 2026 season, his agent also met with the Sacramento Kings front office to discuss their winning culture. They fired their head coach, Mike Brown. We got to talk about De'Aaron Fox, their homegrown star from the 2017 draft. He's 27 years old, and he's been one of the best Sacramento Kings in the 21st century. He's having another good offensive year, 27 points per game, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 48% from the field, 80% from the free throw line. But the Kings right now are 19-19. They're 9th in the Western Conference. Their net rating shows that they should be better than what their record is right now. They've been a little bit unlucky due to opponents shooting very well against them. Now, this hasn't been the start that the Sacramento Kings wanted, and they fired Mike Brown. They've been on a nice winning streak as of late. They've won 6 games at the moment I'm recording this. But if De'Aaron Fox hints that he's going to test free agency in the summer of 2026. You're going to lose a lot of value if you trade him, maybe in the offseason or more so next year at the deadline. So you can get the most for De'Aaron Fox right now if he did hint at you guys that he will test free agency, and then you're running the risk of losing him for nothing, which is the worst case scenario. So you can optimize Fox's value right now. You can get an absolute haul for him, so he's somebody to definitely keep an eye on. But let's say the Kings don't want to trade De'Aaron Fox, but they want to get a big name, and they have to attach a decent sized salary. So they could move Kevin Huerter. Would they move Keegan Murray? We'll see. They're not moving Domantas Sabonis, but I think a guy we could look at is DeMar DeRozan, who they did sign in the offseason. He's having a fine scoring year, 21 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and is shooting 48% from the field. We all questioned his fit in the Sacramento Kings offense in the offseason, and I still think those questions are still very valid because this offense feels clunky at times, and it feels like it's not succeeding to what they thought it could be when they gave him that 3-year deal. But DeMar DeRozan is not making too much money. $23 million this year, $24 million next year, $25 million in 2027. He is 35 years old, and I don't think he's going to be a great player on the last year of his contract, but he's still a good scorer, and I think it goes back to what I talked about with CJ McCollum on the New Orleans Pelicans. He's still playing fine basketball. Could this be orchestrated in a big 3 to 4 team deal where matching salary needs to be included? You could attach his salary and Kevin Huerter's salary, and you can get over $40 million if they wanted to make a big move that way. So here's a wild card, maybe one you didn't expect. I'm going to talk about Desmond Bane of the Memphis Grizzlies, because the Memphis Grizzlies, one of the best teams in the NBA this year. They're 10 games over 500, 3 seed in the Western Conference. They have a ton of depth, so they can either look to maybe trade from some of that depth. Brandon Clark's contract, Luke Kennard's contract, and a couple other guys can get some nice matching salary, but an easy way to do that would also be to trade Desmond Bane. They're not trading Triple J. They're obviously not trading John Morant. Desmond Bane has a massive contract, though. $34 million this year, $36 million next year, $39 million in 27, and then it goes up to $42 million in 2028 and $44.8 million in 2029. This is the rookie extension fully kicking in now. And Desmond Bane hasn't been the same player, it feels like, since that 2023 season, in part in 2024. Now, he's dealt with a plethora of injuries this year, so maybe you'd be selling low on Desmond Bane. But if they wanted to go out, make a big trade for somebody like Jimmy Butler, and they don't want to mess with much of their depth because they've had their fair share of injuries, they could definitely use all the depth in the world, especially when you get into the playoffs, and they could easily match that salary with Desmond Bane. So I'm not saying he's going to get traded, but he's somebody to keep an eye on if Memphis wants to make a big move. Now, here's one that I have to mention. Phoenix Suns, man, they've been disappointing. They've had their fair share of injuries this year, but they moved Bradley Beal to the bench. They've inserted Mason Plumlee into the starting lineup. They are 17-19 right now. They're not even a play-in tournament team in the Western Conference. That would just be an utter disaster if they don't make the play-in tournament this year. Can they even move Bradley Beal? He has the no-trade clause, and no team probably wants him. Could they move Kevin Durant? Could Kevin Durant even ask out? Because I'm not putting it past Kevin Durant. He obviously didn't want to go back to Golden State in 2019. He goes to Brooklyn, plays some of the best basketball of his career, and then he wants out after they're trying to cater to him. He gets traded in that 2023 season in Phoenix. He spent about 2.5 years there now and is still at the top of his game in year number 17. He's still averaging 27 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 52% from the field, 40% from 3, 84% from the free throw line. And what if Kevin Durant is looking at the Suns team right now, realize they can't get much better with the second apron, with Bradley Beal's bad contract and Jusuf Nurkic's bad contract as well, and he's like, I want out. I don't have many years left playing at this level in the NBA. I want to go to a contender. Teams like Memphis, Houston, or some others can easily get to that matching salary of Kevin Durant, and you'd be willing to trade these assets to get KD because he's still playing at that KD caliber level. Not saying he's going to get traded, but Phoenix may need to look at the bigger picture, and this is the only way that they can salvage having one of the worst futures in the league right now. I can't believe it's just been like encouraging moment for this dude, and then he immediately gets suspended for a game because he was late to the team flight. I'm going to talk about Zion Williamson. So I think Zion Williamson could have been in trade discussions all year long as well. He's only played 7 games this year. He just came back with that hamstring injury, and then the team decides to rest him the next day, so they're going to be cautious with it. And then when things are like encouraging, because Zion had a good game coming back where he had 22 points on 60% shooting against Minnesota. He looked skinny. He had a great transition dunk, and then he gets suspended by the team. And I think New Orleans is in a weird spot right now, and I think they could benefit trading high on Zion Williamson when he is healthy at the trade deadline, if he is, because he's still just 24 years old. He may just need a change of scenery. He may just need to get out of New Orleans. He's under contract, $36 million this year, 39 next year, 42 in 27, and then $44 million in 2028. But there's a clause in Zion's contract where he's missed enough games where the Pelicans could cut him theoretically, and they don't have to pay him any of that money. Now, he's too talented of a player right now to cut, but could they think about trading him if they go in a different direction? You trade Ingram, you trade McCollum, you trade Zion, you build a different culture here in New Orleans, you build around Hawkins, Messi, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and the top pick you're going to get in the 25 draft, and all the assets you get back in moving those guys, and you realize that you're just not going to contend with this core in a tough Western Conference, and you look to retool this team completely. It's definitely a possibility. Second to last player we're going to talk about is a player that just got moved to the bench in year number 13. He's their third highest paid player, and that is Khris Middleton of the Milwaukee Bucks. I know he's a Bucks legend. I know he was a vital part of that 2021 championship team, but Khris Middleton currently is making $31 million this year and has a $34 million player option that he's most likely going to opt into next year. He's averaging 12 points this year, 4.5 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 44% from the field, and just does not look like the Khris Middleton of old. He's getting older. He's had a lot of wear and tear on his body, and he's in year number 13 right now. So Milwaukee wants to build this championship window with Giannis. They want to extend it. Dame isn't getting any younger. This team is very old right now, so maybe they look to trade Khris Middleton in a big deal. Does Khris Middleton and Brook Lopez get traded or something like that, and Jimmy Butler ends up going to Milwaukee, and they think a big three of Dame, Giannis, and Jimmy could get it done? Middleton is their only way of pulling something like that off. It's a tough world. They did the same thing with Drew Holiday, trading him to get Damian Lillard. They may do the same with Khris Middleton. And my last player I'm going to talk about, I think could definitely be more talked about in the offseason than the deadline right now, and that is Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. This is a big wild card, but this could be one of the only outs Phoenix may have, because Devin Booker probably has the double amount of trade value than Kevin Durant would have. Now, Devin Booker is having arguably the worst year of his star career, shooting career lows 42% from the field, 32% from three, and is averaging 24 points per game, the lowest since his sophomore year when he was 20 years old back in 2017. He is averaging a career high in assists though, but is taking a step back as one of the top scorers on this team, and that's all Kevin Durant this year. He's played 31 games. He's been healthy. He's 28 years old. He signed a massive extension with the Suns a couple off seasons ago, where he's making 49 this year, $53 million next year, and then it goes to $57 million in 2027 and $61 million in 2028. So he's under contract, but you'd be able to get a haul for Devin Booker and what his resume has shown so far. And Houston owns your first round picks in the future. Could that be a destination where you get all your first round picks back? Maybe it's a top pick in this draft if they don't make the playoffs and it goes up in the lottery. And obviously Houston has some enticing young assets as well. I think this is a more likely deal that happens in the offseason if it were to happen, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on because the Phoenix Suns need to do something, because I don't think moving Jusuf Nurkic is really going to do anything for your championship window this year. So that is going to be for me. I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, I'd appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. Let me know about some of the names that you didn't expect to hear in this video down below, or maybe some of the names where you think, all right, Matt, they're not going to get traded, or maybe it's a name that I didn't talk about in this video that you think could be on the move. Let me know down below. Drop a thumbs up if you guys did enjoy. Subscribe if you were not already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.